everything we're talking about factors into longevity, not just in sort of a biochemical sense, right? Where in theory, if your relationships are better, your hormone levels would be better and cortisol levels would be lower and all of these things would be better. But in just a more fundamental, stark manner, what advantage is there to living longer if your relationships are poor, and the quality of your relationships therefore determines the quality of your life? Now, I'm a full convert to that, right? That's something that, 5 years ago, I would have never given a thought to. I mean, not for, just was not even in my ballpark of thought. And today, of course, I believe it emphatically. To me, one of the things that's been interesting is learning that if that is true, there needs to be a new comfort in sitting with uncomfortable emotions. That the ability to sit in discomfort must be a new trait. So I think if I use myself as an example, historically, anytime I felt uncomfortable, I had a tool to numb it, to get away from it, to distract myself from it. So anything that I didn't like emotionally, I had a very quick Band-Aid for, such that I never had to sit in discomfort.
And what would you do?
It would depend, but it was usually, it could be anything from binge purchasing watches, exercising obsessively, anger, outbursts of anger, which sounds paradoxical. You wouldn't think of that as a tool to numb discomfort. But of course, as I talked about on the podcast with Terry Real, anger is very transiently quite numbing, right? They're in the immediate moment of an outburst of anger, it actually squelches the feeling of inadequacy and loss of control.
I felt much better
and sadness,
for a moment.
Right. But if you want to move into this quality of life where now all of a sudden your relationships are important, you realize very quickly there are times when you have to be uncomfortable and you have to sit in that. There's a psychologist, Susan Davis or something. She gave a TED talk.
Susan David.
David, yeah.
Susan David.
And she gave a TED talk, and I really liked it because she said something to the effect of, she said it much more eloquently, but the gist of it is the admission you have to pay to a meaningful life is being uncomfortable, is being able to sit in uncomfortable emotions. And she made a very funny comment in the talk, which was, if you tell me you don't want to feel blank, blank being some uncomfortable emotion, then I tell you have a dead person's goals. I probably saw that talk 3 or 4 years ago. It was very profound to me. How does that factor into your work? How do you...
Couldn't agree with her more. Actually, Susan David was a guest on my training platform on sessions recently, and when she says it, I couldn't agree with her more. But it's a very basic thought of anybody who does psychotherapy. Is how okay. So anybody who does psychotherapy, as I understand psychotherapy, okay, which is not, my goal is not to make you happy, which is to make it look like you're never going to have any of these feelings, because that person that came in saying I'm unhappy would love to not have those feelings. Right. Sometimes. Yep. Sometimes, not always. So the idea that, this is what you feel, and that doesn't mean you have to act on it or do something or chase them away or make it disappear. This is your experience in this moment. Now, we can do a lot of things with this experience. We can understand it. We can name it, first of all. We can name it. We can frame it. We can understand it. We can put it in context. We can celebrate it. We can write about it. We can physicalize it. We can do a lot of things with this experience, these feelings that you're having. And you need to understand that sometimes they will just come through. They will pass through you, and then they will get out to the other side. You don't have to squelch them. You don't have to judge them. You don't have to be contemptuous of them. I don't say it in those words, but this is the idea. You don't have to numb them. That's the thing that because you were numbing them, not just because you were numbing them. You were numbing because you were judging, because you didn't think you should be feeling those things, because what's wrong with you that you have those things. So there was the contempt in it as well. There's a lot of things very, 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 very quick before you've even gone to buy your next watch or whatever thing you were doing. So sitting, with your inner life and remaining somewhat curious and kind to your inner life. And some call it today self-compassion, but sometimes it's not necessarily always compassionate, but at least it's not contemptuous and judgmental of your inner life, or despairing of it, or terrified by it, that it will never go away, that it will never leave you, that this is your state forever now, etc. This is psychotherapy. This is individual therapy. For me, I'm going to really put myself for the kind of work I do. This is the essence of a lot of the individual work. Fascinatingly, when I see somebody alone and then I get to see them with their partner, and now I see how all those things play out, not just inside of you, but in between the two of you. It's a whole other story. It's like I've just spent time in one room of the house and I didn't even know there was a whole annex to that house. And this is when you understand the difference between the relational thinking, which Terry, of course, is one of the main teachers of, and the individual perspective. And I think that the real importance today is for most of us to be able to not just live in one. The mistake of a lot of the systemic thinkers was that they stopped thinking about the individual and the internal life. It was all, systems thinking. That didn't go. And the mistake sometimes, or the lack in people who have just an individual perspective, is that they're not looking, like you talk about, the gene in context, and that integration is where the nexus of my work sits.